Hi, my name is Courtney Miller, and for the Ecological Integration Symposium, I chose to go to three poster presentations. The first one I went to was Spiroplasma MSRO presents Drosophila meningira against two pastoroid wasps. And this was presented by Chelsea Channing. So the summary of her presentation is that they would test these flies with different wasp sprays to see what effects they have because the wasps like to lay their eggs in these different fly colonies. They did this by separating the flies into groups and treating them with a couple different wasp killers and recording the outcome of how many wasps and flies were at each stage of development. Their conclusion was that LC01 is susceptible to the spiroplasma, which is shown in their studies, but ultimately there was not a significant difference to prove its effectiveness. My reaction to this presentation was I thought it was interesting, cool, but honestly, I didn't really understand it 100%. And the Chelsea was a bit confusing and went a lot of different ways. So I didn't really understand it all that much. And I didn't get to ask questions because there were a lot of people, so we had to go pretty fast. The second presentation I went to was data loggers and artificial eggs reveal wild scarlet mackerel eggs turning behavior. And this is presented by Adam Bower. The summary of this presentation is they got fake mechanical eggs that could sense movement and orientation. They would stick them in the Ara macro subspecies, which is the scarlet mackerel bird. They would leave it in their nest with the eggs that were already in there. And they would take data. This data could help them know the optimal way for the embryo to develop. The results were that the species turned the eggs more than other species in the area with the same size and kind of background. And the data could help them with artificial insemination. Artificial like making of eggs and birds by knowing how and where they need to be in position to make it as real and healthy as possible. My reaction to this is I thought that it was very, very cool and interesting. And I thought it was cool how they could take first that the birds would accept these fake eggs. Now they didn't look very realistic, but I feel like if I was a bird, I feel like I could know if an egg was mine or not. But so the fact that they took them in and then still nurtured them, I thought was really interesting. And that it was cool that they can use this to help breed more. Definitely if they could do this or he talked about that, and hopefully in the future, they could do this for other birds that are endangered to help get more out there or like create more birds of endangered species. And I had no questions. Great explainer. My third and final presentation I went to was estimates of fish taxonomy, diversity in the Espincum River based on environmental DNA versus traditional sampling methods. And this was presented by Megan Hobastak. So the summary for this is her and then a bunch of other people went to a river and to collect data, and they did this at 6 different locations. The water was very low. They were in a drought, so it was a little bit harder, but it was still worked. And for the first sampling is they would sample the traditional way of nets, fishing line, to collect as many fish as possible. And they would then see what type of species of fish that was and collect that data. The other way was DNA sampling, which they would collect water and look at the DNA in the water to see what type of species they had. Um, they wanted to collect this information to see which way would show them more species and is more efficient to know these species. The results is it showed that the DNA sampling from the water produced a way more amount of species than traditional way of fishing. They did say that with the DNA, they would have every once in a while a random fish that's from completely opposite side of the world, and that they would just categorize that as just an outlier and a mistake, and so they would not show that in the data. Out of all three that I went to, I definitely thought this one was the most interesting because I thought it was really cool how they could see what type of species there was just by the water and the DNA that was in that water. And I did have a question for them or for her that I asked of how do you get the DNA from the water to know kind of what's what and things like that. And for her answer, she said for the DNA water sampling is they would like sponge up a bunch of water and then sponge it or squish it through a filter that would then collect all like the DNA particles, and they would send that filter away to a lab where they would take the data, do their data stuff on it, and then have a big database with the DNA with the type of fish. And so they would know what fish were there, species of fish, and then what was not. So ultimately, I thought I learned a lot from the EIS symposium, and the three I went to were all really interesting and cool, and I think I learned a lot. Thank you.